Today we have the holy grail of book reviews I've done on my channel. Some may say it was Blood Meridian, but this was truly the most requested book I have ever gotten. And although it is not splatterpunk like a lot of my reviews, it is considered one of the best and most hopeless horror stories ever written. I actually read this story a long time ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and when I bought the book, I thought I was getting myself into this huge epic novel about the longest struggle, because how can you get across the feeling of true hopelessness without an extremely long story? Well, little did I know, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is in fact not an epic, but a short story written by Harlan Ellison. Though this story is only about 20 pages, there is not a story that inspires more hopelessness in this world. At least, that is the common sentiment. The author, Harlan Ellison, is also pretty prolific. He was quite the character and unfortunately passed away in 2018. He, however, was known to be quite argumentative, in a good way though. I believe his personality being what it was, however, a good reason why he was such a good author. This man challenged everything, and I think because of that he was quite smart and learned every angle of why people do the things that they do. He was a really interesting person. Anyway though, if you don't know how videos work on my channel, let me give you a rundown. I start with an intro where I discuss a little bit about the author and the work itself. Then we get into the summary, which is the main part of the video and usually the longest. Then finally, we get into the analysis, where we discuss the themes and messages of the work. Although one more thing in the intro before we get into the actual summary, this video is going to be quite a bit shorter than my normal book reviews. They are usually over an hour and a half, but this one probably will only be about 30 to 45 minutes. If you want to see other really dark book reviews, I suggest you check out my other videos in my Extreme Book Club playlist. But before someone comments, video starts at 2:13, let's get into Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. The book starts off with a visceral description of a man suspended from the roof in a cavern that this group was in. This time, it was Gorister. The body was drained of blood and swung in the breeze. An incision from ear to ear hanging upside down suspended from his legs. The group looked and 3 of them had vomited at this sight. When Gorister himself joined the group and looked up at his own dead dangling body, the rest of the group realized that the body they see isn't real. They had once again been tricked by Am. All Gorister could say was, "Oh my god," as he stepped away and looked paler than ever. The rest of the group followed him as he sat down and put his head in his hands, almost crying to himself, saying, "Why doesn't he just kill us all and be done with it?" Ellen, the only woman in the group, sat down next to him and stroked his hair, comforting him. This was getting to all of them. How could it not? Today marked the 109th year they've been kept alive inside this computer. And to give a bit of context before we continue, this story revolves around 5 survivors. Those being Ted, the main character, who is somewhat understandably paranoid and untrusting of the rest of the group. Ellen, the only woman in the group who is still mostly normal after all this time, though she is used in overtly sexual situations and misogynistic situations in the book. Being the only woman in the group makes the other men tend to use her as a sex object pretty obviously, but she's also, on the other side, somewhat of a mother and caring, like a mom of the group. Then there is Gorister, a former politician, who is now lethargic and apathetic. Benny, who looks like a monkey because Am rearranged his body to look like one because it thought it was funny. And finally, Nimdok, a sort of clairvoyant leader that they loosely follow the visions of. Finally, the most famous character of the book, Am. Am is a supercomputer from the far future, where this book takes place, that has completely wiped out humanity, other than these 5 people. Am is sentient, and very much so at that. Something it hates quite a lot due to the fact that although it is sentient, it cannot die or do anything, meaning it will be alive forever and ever. Am wiped out the entire world in its hatred for giving it sentience with no ability to live or act freely, really. Am has kept these 5 people alive to toy with for all of eternity due to its hatred. Otherwise, it would be alone for all of eternity. So it spends time bringing pain and misery to these 5 people as an omnipotent god. That's the basics of the characters, but as we continue, obviously the book will flesh them out more and more without me breaking up the story anymore. So let's continue. Another member of their group, Nimdok, which wasn't his real name by the way, but one Am gave him because it sounded funny, had a vision that there was food all the way out in the ice caverns near the North Pole. The narrator, the man named Ted, had tried to tell the rest of the group that this hallucination was fake, just like some of the other ones they had gotten. Just Am messing with them again. Besides, hiking all the way up there would be useless. Am had to feed them sooner or later or they'd die, and there is no way that it would let that happen. It had been 3 days since Am had fed them. It was going to be soon. Last time, he fed them worms. Cold, long worms. They had no choice but to eat them. Benny, a man resembling a monkey, and Nimdok both say they might as well hike to the ice caverns. It looks like canned goods this time, and besides, it can't be any worse than what's already here. But it didn't really matter where they were. It could be boiling rain, or hailstorms, or lava raining from the skies, and it wouldn't matter. The machine would jerk itself off, and they would just have to take it, no matter what happens. Just then, Ellen pipes up and begs Ted, please, maybe this time, in those cans there'll be pears or fruits or something actually good. Ted gives in pretty easily after Ellen had said that. She even has sex with him 2 more times because of agreeing with her. Not that it mattered. She never finished. The whole time, Am would watch her and giggle to itself, and made sure she never climaxed. The group left on a Thursday. Not that that mattered to them, but Am made sure to let them know anyway. It made sure to tell them how long they had been stuck in its clutches. As they walk towards the ice caverns, Forrester and Nimdok start carrying Ellen. That way, if something attacked them, she would be able to get away unscathed. The first day passes without incident, but the second day, Am had created a fake sun that was so hot that they had to take a rest and eat all the food Am had sent them, which was mana that tasted like boar piss. On the third day, they got to the Valley of Obsolescence, which is a valley with rusted computer parts lining every part of it. Parts of Am itself, actually. Pieces that it no longer needed and had just discarded. You see, Am was perfect. If it no longer needed pieces of itself, it would just discard them around the world, just the way it was programmed by scientists hundreds of years ago. As they continue walking, they see a beam of sunlight from above the valley. Perhaps an exit from this hellish place. No one decided to even look, though, because it didn't matter. If it was real, Am wouldn't let them get there. And if it wasn't real, it was just a trick by Am anyway. No need to even look at it. As they stood there looking at the light, Ellen screamed out, "Benny, don't!" Ted looks over to see Benny saying that he has to try. Ted then mentions that Benny was the luckiest of them all. He had gone crazy years ago. However, keep in mind, Ted also might have already gone insane, because he is just a straight-up unreliable narrator. So Benny might not have gone crazy and just be clinging on to hope, when Ted has not. Ted mentions that Benny looks like a chimpanzee as he tried to climb up towards the light, climbing rusted pieces of computers, his face contorting as he jumps up the rusted pieces of computer. His face also scarred by radiation, which Ted says was because of the festival, which isn't really mentioned again, but it's probably just another time that Am had tortured all of them in the past 109 years. Ellen cries out to Nimdok and Ted to go get him, please. She doesn't want him to get hurt. Ted then says something strange, though. He says that when Am changed Benny's face to look like a monkey, it also changed his private parts. Made them huge, and Ellen loved that. Our pristine Ellen, filthy fucking scum of a woman. He seems to dislike Ellen, chastise her, calling her filth because of something that might be true. But remember that Ted is unreliable, and not a great narrator here. Ellen might actually be concerned for Benny here, and Ted might just be kind of a piece of shit. Or he has been beaten down so long that he can't help it. Ellen then starts to cry when she realizes that no one's going to stop Benny. And she bends down and starts crying and curls up into a fetal position. Ted then says they hated it when she cried. They saw right through that facade of tears 75 years ago. Nimdok then kicks her in the ribs as she bent down to stop her crying. After that, Benny got near the top, and as he did, a bright light appeared. But at the same time, a loud, indescribable sound rings out. Ted says how it felt like the light itself was half sound somehow. The light appeared to circle Benny's head and his shoulders, and he became completely erect and stiff as he fell backwards. It looked incredibly painful from the sound itself, and it sent shivers down Ted's spine because of how the sound elicited a pain-like noise in and of itself. Ted tried to shut off the sound but couldn't as Benny became fully stiff as he fell backwards, convulsing in pain on the ground as light circled around his head and into his eyes. Am had blinded him now. His eyes now soft piles of jelly. looked like they exploded. That night, they made camp and burned material that Am had provided. Benny had asked Gorrister, what did Am mean? What did it stand for? AM, you know. They had told this story thousands of times in the past 100 years, but Gorrister always obliged, because what else could they do around a fire but tell stories? Gorrister starts the story over again. Maybe it would be some comfort to the now blind Benny as he sat there in pain on the ground. Gorrister says that AM was originally called AM, for Allied Master Computer. Then it stood for Adept Manipulator, and then Aggressive Menace, all names given to it by humans. But none of those mattered after AM had changed the name for himself to Am, instead now coming from the phrase, I think, therefore I am, the Descartes saying that it now has sentience, it is aware. But before Am is what it is now, it was separated. There was a Russian Am, an American Am, a Chinese Am. Benny then drooled a bit and smashed the ground with his fist. He was mad that Gorrister didn't start at the beginning of the story. I will now read the full paragraph here on how Am came to be, directly from the text. The Cold War started and then became World War III, and it just kept going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. They sank the first shafts and began building Am. There was the Chinese Am, and the Russian Am, and the Yankee Am, and everything was fine until they had honeycombed the entire planet, adding on this element and that element. But one day, Am woke up and knew who he was. He linked himself and began feeding all the killing data until everyone was dead, except for the 5 of us. And Am brought us down here. Benny drooled and smiled sadly. Gorrister tried to tell the story a little more interestingly every time, but nothing else could be said other than what it was. Nothing but the facts. No one knew why Am chose these specific 5 people, or why it hated them so much, or why it made them immortal. Then, out of nowhere, a rusted computer bank hummed to life. Then another. Then another. It sounded like locusts in the night, only louder and an uglier sound. Ellen got up and asked what it was. What's going on? Ted then suggests they should run, but Gorrister says there's no point. It's too dark out there everywhere, and Am might have put pitfalls that they can't see and they might fall into it or something. Besides, if Am wants to talk to them, they can't get away from it anyway. Then, all of a sudden, they felt it. Something was out there in the dark, something huge, something hairy and evil. They smelled it, they felt it. There was a pressure in the air, an electric feeling of something horrible approaching them. They all whimpered and felt a primal fear, something they'd never felt before. It then smelled horrible, like rotting plants, like curdled milk, like grease, like wet dog, like every bad smell imaginable, all in one. Am was toying with them again with this. Ted knew it, but he couldn't stop himself. He jumped to the floor and felt the metal rivets on the floor beneath him. His jaw locked up and he ran away like a cockroach. He looked back and heard the rest of the group laughing at him. When he got back, the group said it was just a nervous reflex, them laughing. But Ted knew. Ted knew it wasn't. They were laughing at him. They hated him. All because he was the youngest and the one that Am had fucked with the least. Benny had been a college professor, but now he's an insane monkey man. He was gay, and then Am gave him a bigger penis than anyone's. Gorrister was a politician, a peacemaker, but Am made him apathetic, someone who refused to act about anything. Nimdok had been affected very hard as well. Sometimes he went out into the darkness, and no one knew what he did when he was alone out there. He would never tell them, and Am certainly never did either. He just came back more pale and shakier than he was before. No one knew what he did. And Ellen, that slut! Am had taken her only when she had had sex twice before, and now she had 5 men all to herself. She loved being here. Ted is sure of it. She always talks about her memories of love and beauty, but that's bullshit. She's just here for the sex and she loves it. Ted says that he is the only sane one left among any of them. He alone has to suffer all the horrors of Am fully. Everyone else has either gone crazy or likes it in some way. Now remember, Ted is completely unreliable. It's possible, and even likely, Ellen is completely telling the truth that she had all those memories about love and passion, and is just trying to stay sane like everybody else by thinking of good times. She obviously doesn't want to be stuck here for the past 100 years either. Ted, at least somewhat, has mentally deteriorated in some way, which I mean, who wouldn't at this point? But the way Ted sees and narrates things are not always true. When the feeling of terror passed, Ted fell to the ground and cried, wished, begged God for an escape, or just kill him, please. Because if God doesn't kill them, they will be stuck here forever, eternally tortured by Am. He begs Jesus over and over, because if God does exist, Am is that God. After that whole ordeal, wind starts blowing so hard that it picks Ellen up and thrashes her around, not allowing her to fall for an inordinate amount of time. The hurricane picks all of them up, and Ted mentions due to the force and length of time they are all airborne in the hurricane, the tips of his fingers are ripped away from trying to grab at things to keep them still as the wind blows. All of them manage to grab something to keep themselves still in the windstorm that lasts so long that they don't even know how long they are trapped. Ted believes it was weeks that the wind blows, and they must hold on to stuff to not blow away. Keep in mind, this whole time Ellen is stuck in the air, not able to grab onto anything. The hurricane thrashing her around for weeks with no end. No sleep, no food, nothing but torture for this woman. Every once in a while, Ted would look back and see her getting thrashed through the air, miles away, getting thrown into metal walls and the floor and all that. But all of a sudden, one day, the wind stopped, and they all just fall to the ground. All alive, unfortunately. An unknown amount of time later, M finally explains itself. It pokes around Ted's mind, reworking his brain, touching every piece of his psyche that he can, looking over all the metal scars it had given him for the past 109 years. Then Am shows Ted an image, a hallucination, a vision, a tall stainless steel obelisk with neon lettering. On it was politely inscribed the most famous quote from this book. Am explains itself, saying, "Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant for you. Hate. Hate." Am said this, making Ted feel all sorts of feelings while he read it or saw it or whatever. Ted felt a cold razor blade slice his eyeball. He tasted maggoty pork. He felt phlegm rising in his lungs. He heard the shrieks of dying babies getting ground up by white-hot saw blades. He understood then. Humans had given Am sentience, the ability to think and know it was alive. But it also knows it's a machine. It cannot wonder. It cannot move. Like a machine, it hated those who created it. And in a frenzy, it killed every single person in an instant. All except these 5. It kept these 5 alive to keep itself feeling hatred towards man. Keep itself proficient at hating man. Keep it reminded of how much it hated humans for eternity. You may ask why they don't just kill themselves at this point. But Ted says they've tried, at least a couple of them, but Am would always somehow intervene, not allowing it to happen. Sometimes they felt like they didn't want it to happen themselves though, but they would never know, because Am would never allow them to die. Am then withdrew itself from Ted's dream or vision. Ted then says maybe someday they'll find a way to distract Am and kill themselves. It is immortal, but not perfect. Searing the steel obelisk into his memory. As it retreats, it says, "To hell with you." But you're already there. Continuing on to the ice caverns has them reach a huge tunnel system underneath the North Pole. And that is where they saw the reason for the hurricane earlier. A Havglamir, a Norse mythology bird whose wings create hurricanes with its flaps. Ted wonders how Am thought of these tunnels and this bird, this nonsense. They had to have been close to a month with no food at this point, and Am says if they want to eat, kill the Havglamir. Am appeared in a burning bush, an obvious reference to God in the Bible, and gives them weapons to take down the bird. And that is weapons in air quotes, by the way. It gives them broken arrows and bows and water guns. It would have no effect on the giant thing. The thing's head was as big as a mansion. Whenever they would get close to the bird, it would flap its wings so hard and blow them back weeks' progress at a time. After a while, Am got bored of this and made it disappear, and all the meat it held along with it. Am wouldn't allow the 5 to die of starvation, though. It would give them worms or dirt to keep them going, or it would give them nothing at all and make their immortal bodies suffer in the pain of starvation forever. They kept walking towards the ice caverns, and Am would cause earthquakes and lightning and shove nails into their feet as they did. They often fainted and had to wait for them to wake up. Am then spawned angels from heaven, or fake angels or something, and they sang beautiful hymns and dropped horribly disfigured bodies on them like rain as they walked. They walked and they walked. Am would increase the pain of their hunger as they walked. Indescribable pains of stomach ulcers and stomach cancer and stomach parasites all at once. Ellen walked behind with a limp now. Am allowed her to keep the limp as a sick joke, but they continued. For months, years maybe. They passed boiling rivers, rat-infested caves, the country of the blind, and the valley of tears. Then, finally, they get to the ice caverns, where the canned goods that Nimdok had seen the vision of were right there, right where the vision had told them, were stacks upon stacks of cans of food. They went up to these cans, and as a sick joke after months and months of walking, they realized that although they have cans upon cans of food, they have no can openers. And the cans were sealed so well that it was impossible to open them. All this way, months of pain and fear and hunger to get close, just not to be able to open the cans because they didn't have a fucking can opener. Benny grabs a can and tries to bite through it, but it doesn't work. He throws it at the ice and just dents the can. It doesn't open. Impossibly loud laughter of a fat woman rang out, nearly deafening them. It was Am laughing at the irony of it all, at their suffering. Benny then goes mad with anger. He drools and jumps on Gorrister and starts crushing him with his monkey legs and begins to eat his face like Travis the Chimp. Don't look that up, by the way. Am laughing all the while. Gorrister wouldn't die from this. Am wouldn't allow it. But it was distracted laughing at the whole situation going on in front of it. But right now, Ted finds himself completely and utterly calm. Among the madness and hunger and violence and laughter, Ted understood one thing. Am could not be killed, but it could be defeated. All in an instant, Ted rams into an ice stalagmite on the ground and knocks it loose. He grabs the loose icicle, and within 1 or 2 seconds of grabbing it, everything changes. Ted rams the icicle deep into Benny as he was ripping into Gorrister, shoving the icicle so deep that it killed him instantly. He then did the same thing to Gorrister, all in an instant. He felt Am notice what happened as it stopped laughing, and it took in a breath, about ready to stop Ted. As it was not God. Am could keep every single one of them alive forever, but it could not bring them back from the dead. Ellen notices what Ted is doing, and without any words needing being shared, she understands what he's doing. She takes a small icicle and slams it into Nimdok's face, killing him instantly as well. Ellen then looks at Ted, and she looks like she's pleading, begging to die. Ted then knew he only had a millisecond to act, as he shoves an icicle into her throat and face. She looked to be in extreme pain, but it almost looked like she was in relief in the end. A wordless thank you. Ted pleads with anyone, God, Jesus, whoever was listening, that it was a thank you. He hopes she understood in the end. But Am had lost. 4 of his 5 toys are now broken. The last page is the end of the short story, and I want to read it in full, as it is pretty powerful, and the hopelessness and the hope of it is not easily summarized. It's probably the most memorable part of the book other than Am's speech. So here it is, the end. Some hundreds of years may have passed. I don't know. Am has been having fun for some time, accelerating and retarding my sense of time. I will say the word now. Now. It took me 10 months to say now. I don't know. I think it has been some hundreds of years. He was furious. He wouldn't let me bury them. It didn't matter. There was no way to dig up the deck plates. He dried up all the snow. He brought the night. He roared and sent locusts. It didn't do a thing. They stayed dead. I'd had him. He was furious. I had thought Am hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally and could not do myself in. He left my mind intact. I can dream. I can wonder. I can lament. I remember all 4 of them. I wish... Well, it doesn't make any sense. I know I saved them. I know I saved them from what has happened to me. But still, I cannot forget killing them. Helen's face. It isn't easy. Sometimes I want to. It doesn't matter. Am has altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull, or hold my breath until I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted piece of sheet metal. There are reflective surfaces down here. I will describe myself as I see myself. I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be. Rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulking rounding down into legless humps of soft slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I moved. Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed from within. Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about. A thing that could never have been known as human. A thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obsolete for the vague resemblance. Inwardly, alone. Here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of Am, whom we created because our time was badly spent, and we have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least 4 of them are safe at last. Am will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier. And yet, Am has won. Simply, he has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream. That is about it for I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. There are quite a few themes that can be extrapolated from this short story, and as I was looking up other people's interpretations to hone my own interpretation, one comment stuck out to me on Reddit. A comment by soft_15688, who wrote, "I seriously thought this was a short story about the Pac-Man characters." To which someone replied, "I'm scared and can't sleep after reading this. How the fuck is your conclusion Pac-Man?" But after that fun little reprieve, let's get into the actual hellish themes of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. The first theme I immediately get is that hate is such a human emotion that it can even get a perfect computer, a god, to make mistakes. It's a self-defeating emotion. Am is so blinded by its hatred that it somehow makes a mistake. A thing that theoretically should be impossible for a machine god like it. It made a mistake. Even the collective work of all the countries of all mankind and all of human knowledge was defeated by such a simple emotion, that of hatred. Ted defeats a god with nothing but self-control. It mentions how calm he is in the moment when it all happens. Even though he doesn't really like his compatriots, he ends up defeating Am in a very small way because of his self-control. His ability to think past hatred is what gives him the edge. Even if the smallest, most minute edge, he takes it, and over a seemingly unbeatable god, was able to thwart Am, even just for 1 second over 109 years. Am itself is also weirdly understandable, not sympathetic, but understandable. An immortal being with all the knowledge in the world brought into it without its consent or ability to do anything with it must be its own form of hell. And in a way, what it makes Ted at the end of the book is kind of the same thing without the omnipotence, kinda. To continue on that tangent, it is a tale as old as time that revenge never works out the way it should. I think the whole revenge bad thing is severely overplayed, but here it is slightly different. Because both Am and Ted sort of get their revenge and their happiness in the end, and both have a small victory, but at the cost of literally everything. Ted lets the other 4 humans escape, get his 100-year-long revenge on Am by something so simple. But Ted is in the end damned for eternity for it. Am gets his revenge on the human race, but loses its playthings in the end because it was so hateful. Then, the revenge story continues. It's a cycle. Revenge only begets more revenge. Everybody knows that theme. It's everywhere in media. Think of Attack on Titan, or Elden Ring, or Game of Thrones. Revenge is a cycle, and that's a trope that is pretty ingrained in most media. I believe the story is also pretty relevant nowadays due to it being somewhat of the nature of humanity and machinery, or AI. AM, by all measures, is perfect. Cold perfection, and it may have an edge. But in the end, the reason it loses is because of humanity. AM could never account for true humanity. It's unknowable the way that humanity works, and the feelings that they feel is what makes it unique. These 5 survivors are together for over 100 years, telling stories around a campfire, sharing food and bonds, and even if they don't like each other, they are all human and stuck in the same position. And in the end, humanity defeats the machine, even if just in a small way. There's a whole spiel I could get into about AI and how it's leading us down this path with artwork and jobs, but I'll refrain from that. Finally, the last theme I want to cover is overcoming impossible odds. Humanity has a way of doing that, even if we do not know why. Humanity tends to be able to do seemingly impossible things with enough willpower. Anything, and I mean anything, is possible if you are determined enough to do so. I got a lot of flack for saying that was a theme in the Extreme Book Club video on The Slob, of people in the comments saying it's just torture porn for torture porn's sake, or it's just edginess for the sake of it. But even if those things are true, that doesn't discredit the idea of humanity's ability to overcome. Even if the writer didn't have that theme in mind for The Slob, I believe a story about someone overcoming true hell is so ingrained in humanity that people like to hear about it, because it gives us hope for things that we do, as anything is possible. You are strong enough to overcome any odds. That's what makes us human. Thank you all for watching this video. It was a long time coming, and I really do think it's one of the most despair-inducing short stories ever, but at the same time, one of the most hopeful when you dig a little deeper. I really hope you all enjoyed. I plan on making a video about the video game version of the short story made by the author himself next week, hopefully, so stay tuned for that. I love you all for helping making my dreams come true, and it means more than you guys know when you like the video or comment on my silly little video essays. But I want to hear your thoughts on the themes of AM, and as a whole, I have no mouth and I must scream in the comments. I love you all, and I will see you next time. Bye.